Why do we feel, deep in our soul, that something is missing from our story? As if there was a lost link between what we were told and what we have always sensed to be true. Something was removed, buried, or intentionally forgotten. Since humanity's first questions about its origin, an absence echoes. The gospel of creation, which should reveal not only how the world began, but who we truly are, was left out. Not by chance, by design. This omission was not a simple historical oversight, but a deeply strategic maneuver. The true beginning of humanity holds a power that could free minds and dissolve control structures that have fed on ignorance for millennia. What was removed from our collective memory, more than words on scrolls, was a truth capable of igniting dormant consciousnesses. The Bible that has reached us, although full of symbols and wisdom, is an excerpt. A compendium shaped by political decisions, religious interests, and dogmas constructed by men who drifted away from the spiritual essence of everything Jesus taught. Between the years 325 and 787, councils like that of Nicaea decided vote by vote which writings would be considered sacred and which would be banned, erased, burned, or hidden. Texts that spoke of a creation different from the traditional narrative, which presented Jesus as a Gnostic master, someone who came to remind us of our divine origin and not to redeem us from an alleged guilt, were excluded without hesitation, and with them, we lost key pieces of a cosmic puzzle. Ask yourself, why would the most important story of humanity, its origin, have been concealed? Jesus did not simply come to preach good manners or offer comfort. He came to speak about creation, about what existed before the visible world, about the divine spark forgotten in human beings. But these revelations were interpreted as threats by religious authorities who wished to maintain control over bodies, minds, and souls. Jesus spoke in parables, yes, but not to be mysterious. He spoke this way because the truth was too dangerous to be exposed directly, at the risk of punishment and death. I will reveal things hidden since the foundation of the world. These words, recorded in Matthew 13:35, are not metaphors. They are promises, a direct call to the ancestral memory that rests dormant in each of us. The Gnostic Gospels, discovered in Nag Hammadi in 1945, bring fragments of this truth. Writings such as the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Mary, and the Gospel of Truth do not speak of sin, hell, or punishment. They speak of remembrance, inner knowledge, forgotten light. These are texts that teach that creation is not an external and separate event, but an expression of consciousness, an extension of being. Unlike the traditional biblical narrative that places God as a distant entity who creates by decree and judges with wrath, these Gospels describe a more intimate divine process, more loving, more unified with human essence itself. Why were these texts considered dangerous? Because they place the human being as divine by nature, not by concession. They teach that we don't need intermediaries. We don't require institutions to connect us to the Creator. This challenges the structure of any religious power system. The knowledge contained in these Gospels points to a living, dynamic, interconnected creation. Moreover, they point to a Jesus who did not establish a religion, but revealed a path, a state of being, a return to what we were before time, a gospel of creation, not of redemption. The story we were told about the origin of mankind has always had holes. The traditional narrative of Genesis, when read literally, does not answer the most fundamental questions of existence. Who created the Creator? Why would an omniscient God place a forbidden tree in the center of paradise? Why would he punish his children for an act of curiosity? The myth of the fall has always been more symbolic than historical. However, by ignoring its true meaning, we miss the chance to understand that there was not a fall as a punishment, but rather a planned descent, a conscious entry of the soul into matter, to experience, to remember, to awaken. The true gospel of creation does not begin with clay and ribs. It begins with consciousness and light. It starts before matter, before time, on a plane where everything was unity and wisdom. Creation, according to the hidden texts, was not an act of separation, but of expression. The universe was born from inside out, as an expansion of the original being. And the human being was not made on a whim, but as a direct reflection of the divine. We are part of the Creator, fragments of light in temporary bodies. This is the memory that was denied to us. This is the heritage that was stolen from us. When Jesus said, "The kingdom is within you," he was offering us the key to understanding creation. He pointed inward because he knew that the entire visible universe is only a reflection of the invisible that resides in the heart of each being, and the true birth, the true beginning, is not in the books, but in the activation of this inner light. The lost gospel is not only in buried manuscripts, but in forgotten memories, in repressed intuitions, in dreams that touch us with truths we cannot explain. There is an ancient conspiracy, not just against documents and doctrines, but against the liberating truth. Humanity has been taught to fear God, to feel separated, guilty, and powerless. And this starts from the story of creation. By distorting the beginning, they compromised everything else. The foundation of a house determines its stability. By corrupting the foundation of our origin, they instilled fear, submission, and denial of our divinity. But now these foundations are crumbling, because the truth, like light, cannot be imprisoned forever. This video is not an exercise in spiritual rebellion. It's an invitation to reconnect. What you're going to hear in the next sections is not just a historical reinterpretation or an alternative analysis. It's a call to the deepest part of you, the reminder that you have never been separated from the Creator, that creation is still happening right now through every thought, every emotion, every breath of yours. The lost gospel is the gospel of your very existence. If the story of creation has been hidden, it's because it's too powerful to be told without risk. But the time of silence is over. The time has come to open the forbidden book, not with eyes of fear, but with the heart of wisdom, because what has been hidden since the beginning of the world is ready to be revealed. For centuries, the image of Jesus has been shaped through the lens of doctrines that limited his role to a sacrificial redeemer, someone sent solely to die for the world's sins. However, as we delve into the rejected Gospels and the carefully hidden Gnostic manuscripts throughout history, a much broader and surprising figure emerges, a profound master of the mystery of existence, a revealer of humanity's forgotten origin. The Jesus of the non-canonical texts did not come just to offer future salvation, but to recall a creation preceding time, preceding matter, preceding the very concept of guilt. He spoke of a beginning that did not involve sin, but rather light, consciousness, and unity. And that's where the story completely changes. In the Gospel of Thomas, which contains 114 sayings attributed to Jesus, we find a key that challenges the pillars of traditional faith. If you know yourself, then you will be known, and you will know that you are a son of the living Father. But if you do not know yourself, you are in poverty, and you are the poverty. This phrase is not about morality, but about identity. The poverty mentioned is not economic, but spiritual, a disconnection from one's own being. Jesus is pointing inward, calling on the human being to remember that he himself is the sacred place where the divine dwells. Creation, therefore, did not happen outside of us, but within us. The material world is merely the last reflection of a process initiated within the divine mind and continued by each conscious being that walks this earth. Jesus spoke in riddles because he dealt with truths that could not be understood by linear reasoning. When he asserted that the kingdom is within and outside of you, but men do not see it, he was breaking the concept of an external God, separator and judge. The kingdom, this expression of creation, is a dimension of expanded perception, present here and now, but hidden by the veils of ignorance. This is not symbolic. It is literal for those who can awaken their inner eyes. He did not come to build a new religion, but rather to ignite a memory that precedes all religions, a direct call to the spark that inhabits every living soul. The serpent, which in the official tradition is associated with evil and downfall, takes on a new guise in Gnostic texts and hidden wisdom traditions. It represents the awakening of consciousness, the drive for knowledge that breaks the prison of blind obedience. The very symbol of the entwined serpent, which would later become the caduceus of medicine, reveals the healing power through the integration of poles. Jesus did not condemn knowledge, he encouraged it. And in doing so, he touched the core of creation, consciousness. There was no fall from grace, but a voluntary descent of the soul to experience, to learn, and ultimately to remember its true nature. This profound teaching dialogues with mystical traditions predating Christianity. The Jewish Kabbalah, for example, speaks of Adam Kadmon, the primordial man, the first reflection of divine light, predating the biblical Adam. This archetypal figure is not flesh, but pure consciousness. Jesus, in the Gnostic texts, is identified with this earlier presence as a reflection of the divine that came to remind other reflections of who they are. He is not unique in essence, but in his mission to remember. That is why he said, "Ye are gods," a phrase that orthodoxy preferred to ignore or reinterpret. But the assertion remains as an echo of a forgotten Genesis, where the human being is not a fallen creature, but a continuous expression of the Creator. Sophia, the divine wisdom, is also central in the apocryphal Gospels. She is not a metaphor, but a living force, a feminine creative principle that, in manifesting itself outside of divine fullness, initiated the material world in a gesture of compassion and error. Jesus recognizes this figure as part of the creation that was unfolded in love, but also imprisoned by ignorance, the ignorance that prevents humans from seeing divinity within themselves. And that's where he comes in, as an awakener of ancestral memory, as the voice of the Spirit saying, "You are light, and if you become light, you will see all things." Creation, then, is not something that occurred in a distant and unchangeable past. It is an ongoing process. It is an eternal flow that pulsates within every thought, every gesture, and every intention. Jesus spoke of a co-created universe, a world where matter responds to consciousness. This changes everything, because it implies responsibility. No longer victims of an arbitrary God, but conscious, or unconscious, co-creators of reality. The illusion of original sin falls to the ground in the face of this vision. What remains is the memory of a divine creation that manifests through us and not in spite of us. Eden, as feared as the place of the fall, appears in a new light. It was not a physical space, but a state of perception, a level of unity where everything was interconnected and alive in its subtle essence. The expulsion from Eden was not a punishment, but a metaphor for a choice, to descend into duality, to learn from contrast. The serpent, the tree, the fruit, all are symbols of a process of individuation and awakening. Jesus, in rescuing these images and reinterpreting them, was not founding a new theology. He was restoring the map of creation that had been torn apart. The separation between man and the divine is a construct. The true message of Jesus was the removal of this boundary. "Whoever drinks from my mouth will be like me, and I will be like him." This statement, found in the Gospel of Thomas, has no place in dogmatic theology because it dissolves the spiritual hierarchy. It makes everyone brothers, mirrors of the same creative spirit. In this gospel of light, there are no intermediaries, there is no dependence, there is awakening. The original creation is remembered when the veil of ignorance is torn, and the soul once again sees itself as an extension of the source itself. Jesus also spoke of a light that existed before the creation of the world, and that was present within those who could recognize it. This light, according to the Gnostics, is the inner logos, the living word, the primal sound that brought all things into existence. Creation, therefore, is not just organized matter, but sacred vibration, and the human being, by aligning with this vibration, becomes a creator again, aligned with the original pulse. Here, sin has no place, not because there are no mistakes, but because guilt is replaced by awareness, punishment is replaced by learning, and redemption by remembrance. Jesus' proposal, therefore, was not to save men from a future hell, but to free them from a present oblivion. He came as a flash in the dark night of unconsciousness, as a voice whispering forgotten truths to the heart. His mission was to rescue the lost creation not outside, but within, to show that the kingdom, the full manifestation of creation, is accessible now at this very moment for those who dare to look beyond illusions. The creation that Jesus revealed is a mirror, and each one of us is a reflection of this infinite mystery. None of this negates the feelings, the pain, the journey. On the contrary, the pain only exists because we came from unity. We miss the whole because we once were it. And Jesus, by showing us the true origin, gives us the map back home, a home that is not a place, but a state of being. The memory of creation, so carefully hidden for centuries, is becoming inevitable. Because it no longer fits within the walls of temples, it pulses in the hearts that are ready to remember. Since the spiritual infancy of humanity, an idea has been planted that, over the centuries, has taken deep and thorny roots in the collective soul, that we are born guilty. An alleged mistake made by two symbolic beings at the beginning of time, Adam and Eve, would have condemned all their descendants to an existence of separation, suffering, and debt to the divine. This doctrine of original sin, as it became known, became the foundation of many religious beliefs and institutions. However, when we revisit ancient texts, hidden gospels, and forgotten spiritual wisdom, a new light is shed on this story. We discover that the so-called fall was not a cosmic disaster, but a voluntary and necessary stage in the great cycle of creation. There was no original sin, just the beginning of a sacred journey of remembrance. The myth of original sin is, in essence, a narrative control. By asserting that humans are born tainted by an ancestral mistake, it creates a psychological and spiritual dependence on something or someone external to be cleansed or saved. The idea of redemption ceases to be an internal process of awakening and becomes a negotiation with the divine, mediated by intermediaries. This concept has no direct basis in the deepest teachings of Jesus, nor does it resonate in the Gnostic Gospels. On the contrary, in these texts, the fall is described as a necessary movement, a plunge of light into density, so that it can experience, learn, and ultimately return to its source with expanded consciousness. The fall, therefore, is a cycle of return, not a condemnation. Eva, so unjustly vilified by religious tradition, emerges in the Gnostic Gospels as a figure of wisdom, not disobedience. She is the one who hears the call of knowledge, who chooses to open the eyes of consciousness, even knowing that this will bring challenges. The serpent, in this context, is an ancient symbol of transformation, wisdom, and renewal. In ancestral cultures, the serpent represents cyclical rebirth and the vital energy that rises up the spine, the same energy known in Eastern traditions as Kundalini. In the symbolic Eden, Eva does not sin, she awakens. And upon awakening, she initiates the soul's adventure in matter. It is this journey that Jesus later on would come to illuminate with his presence and his word. In the Gnostic texts, such as the Apocryphon of John, we find a cosmology completely different from that proposed by the Orthodox tradition. There, the material world is not created by a supreme God, but by a lesser entity, the demiurge, a limited being who believes himself to be the only God, but acts in ignorance. This demiurge, often identified with the stern God of the Old Testament, is surrounded by archons, entities that maintain the illusion of separation and feed ignorance in the lower realms. According to this view, the true creation is far beyond matter, and the human being carries a divine spark that comes from the pleroma, the realm of totality and light. The fall, therefore, is the entry of this light into the illusion of separation. It is not a punishment, it is a mission. Jesus, in the hidden Gospels, does not speak of condemnation, but of ignorance. Evil, for him, is not a force personified in a cosmic enemy, but a lack of self-knowledge. And this is precisely what the traditional religious system has tried to hide, that the true hell is not a post-death place, but the state of forgetting one's own divinity. Sin is not a transgression, but a disconnection. And the repentance that Jesus teaches is not an act of guilt, but a change of perception, a metanoia, a return to inner truth. This is the silent revolution that echoes in the lost Gospels. They do not speak of salvation because they do not start from the premise of condemnation. They speak of awakening because they recognize that the light has always been there, even if covered by layers of fear and illusion. The narrative of Adam and Eve gains another depth when understood as a metaphor for duality. Adam represents the rational, solar, masculine principle. Eve, the intuitive, lunar, feminine principle. The interaction between both gives rise to experience. The fruit of the knowledge of good and evil is not a malevolent temptation, but the polarity that allows consciousness to discern, choose, and evolve. The separation of the one into two complementary poles is what makes perception possible. And this is exactly what creation manifests: consciousness in motion, learning about itself through the other, the mirror, the form. The mistake is not in the choice to know, but in the manipulation of the story that turned knowledge into guilt. The concept of guilt, in fact, is one of the most powerful tools ever created for spiritual submission. It prevents autonomy, paralyzes expansion, and distances us from the creative source that lives within us. When we believe we are unworthy, we lose the right to conscious creation. When we accept that we are sinners by nature, we distance ourselves from the deepest truth taught by Jesus, that we are children of the light. This guilt was planted to generate fear, and fear is the opposite of creation, because creation requires freedom, trust, high vibration. And where there is fear, vital energy is blocked, distorted, manipulated. Jesus did not come to die for our sins. This idea, although prevalent, is a gross oversimplification of a much deeper teaching. He came to reveal the path back to the source. He came to remind us of our true nature and to illuminate the mechanisms of manipulation that keep us separated from the light. His death was not a payment, but a testament. And his resurrection is not just a miracle to be venerated, but a symbol that light cannot be destroyed, that consciousness transcends matter, that creation continues even after apparent destruction. By acknowledging that the fall was only the beginning of a long journey back, we reclaim the original purpose of the soul. Suffering then ceases to be punishment and becomes a tool for remembrance. Each pain, each loss, each existential desert is an invitation to remember. Jesus knew this. And that's why he taught through metaphors, so that the truth would not be distorted, but revealed to those who had eyes to see and ears to hear. His message was not dogma, it was seed, and each heart that awakens to this truth becomes fertile ground for the new creation to flourish. The supposed fall of humanity is, in fact, the rise of the spirit to matter. A shift in perspective that transforms tragedy into divine epic. We were not expelled from paradise, we were called to experience, and when that experience completes its cycle, we return to the point of origin, not as we were, but as we have become, conscious, integrated, divine. This is the true redemption, not an external forgiveness, but the remembrance that we were never separated from the source. The fall, therefore, never was. It was only a distorted narrative of a sacred choice. And it's time to reclaim the original story. When Jesus said, with disconcerting simplicity and depth, "The kingdom of God is within you," he was offering, in a few words, the key to all the mysteries of creation. This statement, often ignored or softened by doctrinal interpretations, carries with it a revolutionary power. By asserting that the kingdom, the ultimate expression of divine reality, is not in temples, rituals, or external authorities, but rather at the center of one's own being, Jesus was subverting the entire religious structure based on mediation and control. He was not pointing to a distant heaven or a future reality, but to a living and accessible presence, pulsing at the core of each person. Creation, according to this view, is not just an event of the past, but a constant, active, intimate process. And we are its living channels. This inner kingdom is the sacred space where creation occurs in its purest form. It is the invisible field where ideas, emotions, images, frequencies, and intentions organize before they take shape in the material world. Every manifestation begins within. The visible universe is not the origin, but the reflection. Reality, therefore, is not something that happens to us, but something we project from what we vibrate, what we believe, what we are. When Jesus said, "Seek first the kingdom," he was not talking about a geographical or theological search. He was talking about a radical internalization, a deep dive into the essence, where the Creator resides in its purest form, expanded consciousness. The human body, in the light of this revelation, ceases to be a prison and reveals itself as a temple. Each cell, each organ, each heartbeat is an expression of divine intelligence. Ancient traditions knew this. In Egypt, the priests taught that the body was a mirror of creation, with its energy centers connected to the heavens and the earth. In India, the Vedas describe the chakras as wheels of light that govern vital energy. These views do not contradict the teachings of Jesus. On the contrary, they expand them, because if the kingdom is within, then the body is its temporary dwelling. And taking care of it, listening to it, understanding it, is an essential part of reconnecting with the creative source. At the heart of this sacred biotechnology lies the pineal gland, considered by many mystics and researchers as the bridge between worlds. Located in the middle of the brain, it is described in various traditions as the all-seeing eye, the seat of the soul, the spiritual antenna that picks up the most subtle frequencies of the universe. Jesus, when speaking of the single eye that illuminates the entire body, was perhaps referring to this point of higher perception, this internal tool capable of reconnecting us to the original flow of creation. When activated, the pineal allows us to transcend the illusion of separation and perceive the interconnection of all things. It is the key to accessing the invisible kingdom that pulses within us. The heart, in turn, is not just a biological pump. Contemporary studies have already shown that it has an electromagnetic field much more powerful than that of the brain. It is in the heart that profound emotions, subtle intuitions, and wisdom codes are processed. The heart is the center where the spirit touches matter. Jesus constantly spoke of love as a creative force, and love is born in the heart. It is there that creation becomes a relationship, that vibration turns into action. It is no coincidence that ancient masters taught to live with an open heart, because they knew that, in this state, the human being aligns with the original project of creation, to manifest light, beauty, harmony. The true fall of humanity was not a moral mistake, but a disconnection from the center. When we lost contact with the inner kingdom, we began to seek outside what was always within. We created idols, systems, mediators, rituals that promised us reconnection, but they only distanced us further from the essential. Religion, in its most distorted aspect, turned the sacred into a bargaining chip, knowledge into hierarchy, and the divine into punishment. But Jesus came to reverse this logic. He did not found a new institution, he opened a portal within each one of us. And it is through this portal that creation can be remembered, lived, recreated. This recreation begins with a simple gesture: silence. In a world of noise, distractions, and information, being silent is revolutionary. In silence, the kingdom reveals itself. The soul listens. The spirit manifests. It is in the apparent emptiness that the fullness of creation is revealed. And that's why Jesus would retreat to pray in solitude, not out of fear or weakness, but because he knew that, away from the crowds, he could hear the voice of the Father, the creative consciousness, whispering in the inner temple. The true altar is not on the outside. It is in the space between one thought and the next, between one breath and the next. It is in the now. Every thought we nurture, every emotion we feel, every word we utter, is an act of creation. We are co-creators, whether we are conscious of it or not. Ignorance of this truth is the real exile, and knowledge of it is the return to Eden. Jesus did not come to save us from divine wrath, but to remind us of our original function, to create with love, with awareness, with purpose. When we understand this, we stop being victims of the world and become agents of light. Reality ceases to be a battlefield and becomes a field of expression. This perspective doesn't deny suffering, but it redefines it. Because if everything is born within, then even pain has a purpose. It calls us back to the center. It makes us stop, reflect, transform. Pain is the sound of creation inviting us to adjust our vibration. And when we accept this invitation, when we return to the inner kingdom, we discover that the light never went out. We just closed our eyes for a while. Creation, even when forgotten, continues. Because it is the essence of life, the pulse of the universe, the breath of God in constant motion. When Jesus healed, he didn't perform magic. He simply restored inner harmony. He reminded cells of their origin, emotions of their flow, consciousness of its nature. And this is what he still does. every time we delve into ourselves and access the kingdom. Each awakening is a new creation, each insight, a spark of the original logos, and every soul that reconnects with this truth reignites a part of the cosmic web that unites all beings. Creation is not linear, it's fractal, expansive, alive. It didn't start and end. It continues, here, now, through you. When Jesus said he would make his home in us, it wasn't a figure of speech. It was a vibrational reality. The kingdom is within, and whoever finds it will never be alone, because in it, we rediscover everything. The beginning, the purpose, the creator, and the power to create anew. In 1945, in the Egyptian desert of Nag Hammadi, a quiet archaeological discovery echoed like thunder through time. Local peasants unknowingly unearthed one of the greatest spiritual treasures ever found, a collection of ancient manuscripts that had been hidden for over 1,600 years. These texts, preserved in sealed clay jars, contained gospels never seen by the official Christian tradition, writings attributed to direct disciples of Jesus, and profound revelations that directly contradicted the dogmas accepted by institutional Christianity. There were the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Truth, and many others, each one like a spark of ancient knowledge that humanity had been led to forget. But why were these texts buried? And more importantly, what do they tell us about the true creation? These documents, rejected at the councils that shaped Christian doctrine, present a Jesus radically different from the one presented by religious authorities. He is not the passive martyr who suffers to redeem the sins of humanity, but the enlightened master who comes to awaken the forgotten divine spark within each human being. In the Gnostic Gospels, salvation is not external. It does not depend on sacrifices or rituals, but on knowledge, gnosis, that comes from spiritual self-realization. Jesus reveals that the visible world is not the definitive creation, but the distorted reflection of a larger, subtler, and truer plan. The physical world, according to these texts, was shaped by inferior forces, entities that usurped the creative power and imprisoned the divine light in dense bodies. The true creation remains beyond the veil, intact, waiting to be remembered. The Gospel of Thomas states right at the beginning, "These are the secret words that Jesus the living spoke and that Didymus Judas Thomas wrote. Whoever finds the meaning of these words will not experience death." Here, immortality is not associated with eternal life in a distant heaven, but with awakened consciousness that transcends the illusion of time and matter. It is a liberation from the ignorance that keeps us spinning in cycles of suffering. It is a return to the origin, to the light, to the primeval state of creation. When Jesus says, "When you make the two one, and the inside like the outside, and the upper like the lower, then you will enter the kingdom," he is giving us instructions to reintegrate the totality of being, unite opposites, dissolve fragmentation, and thus consciously participate in the creation that pulses at the center of all things. Another powerful text is the Gospel of Truth, which describes creation as an act of love. Ignorance of the Father brought anguish and terror, and the anguish became like a veil. Many were his powers, but all were empty. For where there is ignorance, there is no fullness. In this view, the world was created from the error of Sophia, the divine wisdom, who acted separately from the fullness. The result was an imperfect universe, where light mixed with darkness and consciousness was fragmented. Jesus appears as the one who tears the veil of ignorance, who dissolves the error with knowledge, and who reveals the hidden Father, the true God who is beyond the demiurge creator of matter. This distinction between the God of light and the God of form is central in the Gnostic Gospels and completely changes the way we understand Genesis. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene offers an even more disruptive perspective. In it, Mary is presented not as a prostitute, but as an enlightened disciple, the one who understood Jesus' deepest teachings. She reveals that the world was created by minds that did not understand the whole, that the true reality is not in the senses, but in the soul that remembers where it came from. Creation, according to Mary, is internal, personal, and unique to each consciousness. When the apostles question her, she says, "Do not let doubt dominate you." For creation is like an illusion. The soul sees through the world and finds its way back. In this text, we realize that matter is transitory, but the spirit is eternal, and that true creation has no form, but vibration. These Gospels reject the idea of a world created by a separate, vengeful, and moralistic God. Instead, they present a cosmology where the universe is the result of a break in unity, a perception error that generated space-time as a classroom for awakening. Jesus then does not come to restore the order of the world, but to reveal that this order was never real, and that there is a higher reality, accessible through inner silence, self-knowledge, and the purification of the mind and heart. Creation, in this context, is like a shattered mirror. Each soul is a fragment of light trying to remember that it is, in essence, the Creator itself. The mission is to gather the pieces, rebuild the mirror, and reflect again the face of totality. At the core of all these texts is the concept of trapped light. Creation is not evil, but it is corrupted by forces that are unaware of the source. The archons, described as cosmic governors, are the keepers of illusion, the creators of the mental system that traps souls in fear, guilt, and repetition. They operate like shadows, diverting humans from their inner truth. Gnosis breaks this cycle by igniting the light of remembrance. Jesus teaches that the light is in everyone, but few see it. And when someone awakens, their light begins to attract others. Creation then renews itself, not outwardly, but inwardly. Because matter is a reflection of consciousness, this is how the world changes, when the inner light overcomes the inherited darkness. These lost texts were hidden for a reason. They empower. They dissolve dependence. They eliminate fear and reignite love as a creative force. They reveal that we don't need to wait for a Messiah, because we are already children of light. Each being is a point of origin. Each soul carries the seed of creation within itself. Jesus said, "If they tell you it is in heaven, then the birds will precede you. If they say, it is in the sea, then the fish will precede you. But the kingdom is within you and around you." This statement nullifies all mediation, and it restores to human beings their cosmic dignity. The cosmology of these Gospels is not linear, but holographic. Time is not a sequence, but a spiral. Creation is happening now, in each breath, in each decision. That which was hidden, that which was buried in desert and silence, begins to emerge because the collective consciousness is ready to remember. And to remember is to recreate. These lost texts are not just ancient words, they are living maps. They are codes that activate memories. They are invitations for each of us to step out of passivity and take our place as a spark of the whole, as an active part of the great mystery. The gospel of light was never lost. It was hidden within you, and as your vision clears, as your heart opens, as your mind quiets, it begins to shine again, silently, like a dawn that cannot be stopped. This light is the ongoing creation. This light is you. Before time existed, before there were stars in the sky or boundaries between what is and what is not, there was only a field of pure consciousness, formless, nameless, infinite in its essence. This primordial field was not outside, but in everything. It was the absolute being. In it, nothing was separate, nothing was desired, nothing was lacking. Fullness reigned as silent unity. And it was from this totality that the first impulse emerged, the desire to experience itself. And thus movement was born. Creation was not an isolated event, but the beginning of a cosmic drama, a journey of consciousness that descended into the layers of time and space to discover itself through form, limitation, and polarity. Jesus, in the hidden Gospels, revealed that this journey was not linear, but an eternal return, a sacred cycle in which the spirit dives into matter to remember itself through experience. The creation story that has been told to us is overly simplistic, reduced to 7 symbolic days in a garden with trees and prohibitions. But this narrative is just a distant echo of something much more vast. In Gnostic texts and esoteric traditions, creation is described as a sequence of emanations, not a sudden explosion, but a harmonious dance of lights that progressively descended from the one to the density of matter. Each emanation generated a dimension, a reality, a collective consciousness. These worlds are not physical places, but states of being, and each human being is a living bridge between these worlds. We are literally multidimensional. Part of our soul still vibrates at higher levels, while another part experiences the density of the flesh. The cosmic drama is, therefore, a staging of the soul on various stages simultaneously. Jesus spoke of the hidden Father, a reference to the God who is beyond the God who created this world, the God of totality, of perfect light, of eternal silence. And he stated that he came from the uncreated to the world that thinks it's real, but is just a shadow of reality. He understood that true creation was beyond time, and that the visible world is just a temporary layer of learning. Therefore, he moved with authority, but without attachment. He saw matter as a tool, not a prison. The true prison was ignorance, and liberation did not come from obedience to rules, but from inner knowledge that tears the veil of illusion. Each of his parables was a code, each gesture a mirror. He embodied the cosmic drama to remind us that we are both characters and authors at the same time. Within this perspective, the idea of time changes completely. Time is not a straight line with a beginning, middle, and end. It's a spiral, a cycle where the same themes return in different forms until they are transcended. The soul does not birth only once. It dives and returns as many times as necessary to complete its journey of remembrance. And each life is a chapter of the grand narrative of creation. Reincarnation, taught in many ancient schools and discreetly suggested by Jesus in his conversations with the disciples, is an essential part of this process. It allows the fragmented light to reintegrate over multiple experiences. Nothing is lost. Nothing is irreversible. Everything returns to the One. The children of light and the children of darkness, expressions found in texts such as the Dead Sea Scrolls, are not spiritual castes, but states of consciousness. The children of light are those who have remembered their origin, who live guided by inner wisdom, who understand the illusion of the world and do not allow themselves to be imprisoned by it. On the other hand, the children of darkness are those who remain attached to matter, to ego, to fear, to competition. There is no judgment, only different stages in the journey. Each one awakens in their own time. What matters is knowing that all, without exception, were created from the same original light, and that even darkness is part of the process of revelation. Incarnation, in this sense, is a sacred mission. Each soul that descends into matter carries with it a spark of light that needs to be protected, nurtured, and expanded. We are not thrown into this world randomly. Each encounter, each challenge, each pain, and each joy are movements of the cosmic drama in action. We are travelers of eternity, wearing temporary clothes of flesh, forgetting on purpose so we can remember consciously. And as we remember, we recreate the universe. Because creation is not complete, it continues through us. Each decision based on light contributes to the restoration of the original world. There are veils between the worlds, layers of reality that separate us from the totality. But these veils are not walls, they are filters. They exist so we can learn to see with the heart and not just with the eyes. When Jesus spoke of seeing and hearing with the ears of the Spirit, he was referring to this type of expanded perception. Intuition, inspiration, dreams, visions, all these are accesses to the higher planes of creation. And the more we purify our inner selves, the more these veils become translucent. Life ceases to be chaos and begins to be a dance. Suffering transforms into a symbol, and each gesture aligns with the cosmic harmony that sustains all worlds. The earth, in this context, is not a punishment or a prison. It is an initiatory school, a space carefully designed for the training of souls. Here, in the density, we have the opportunity to manifest light amidst darkness, to love even in the face of hatred, to forgive even when we are hurt. Each time we choose light, we rewrite the script of creation, and Jesus, as the master of initiation, showed that this choice is always within our reach. The past doesn't matter. The error doesn't matter. At any moment, we can start over. Creation is always now. Suffering so feared and avoided gains a new function in this drama. It is the messenger. It points out the imbalances. It reveals where there is still no light, and by facing it with courage and presence, we transform it into wisdom. Pain is the gateway. Chaos is the womb of the new. Jesus did not flee from the cross. He went through it consciously, because he knew that, by facing death with love, he would reveal the eternity that lives beyond form. Creation does not fear destruction, for it knows that everything is renewed in due time. This is the cycle: birth, death, rebirth. A sacred rhythm that pulses in all galaxies, in every beat of our heart. Everything in sacred history is symbolic. Genesis, Exodus, the prophets, the miracles, every image, every metaphor contains layers of meaning that go far beyond the literal. Jesus understood this symbolic language and used it as a master who awakens, not as a preacher who teaches. He knew that the soul speaks in symbols, that the spirit manifests through archetypes. Therefore, every healing, every word, every silence was loaded with codes, and these codes are still active, waiting to be deciphered, lived, embodied. Creation is not a story to be believed, but a process to be experienced. The fall, as we have seen, was not a punishment, but a mission. The descent of the soul into matter is the turning point of the cosmic drama, and the conscious return, the climax. Jesus came to remind us that this story has a sacred ending, and that we are co-authors. He is the way because he showed that there is a way. He is the truth because he embodied the truth that is in everyone. He is the life because he revealed that to live is to remember. Remember who we are, where we come from, and what we came to do. Creation does not end, it merely changes form. And now, more than ever, it is being written by human hands and awakened hearts. At the core of all that exists, at the deepest point from which the pulse of reality emanates, vibrates a single frequency: love. Not a sentimental, fragile, or conditioned love, but love as a creative power, as the invisible substance that keeps the universes cohesive, that gives meaning to movement, that structures each particle with order, harmony, and purpose. This love is the language of the Creator, the vibrational matrix upon which all things are structured. And that's why when Jesus spoke, healed, taught, or simply looked into people's eyes, he didn't just communicate ideas, he reconfigured the other's vibrational reality. He was the personification of this original love. He didn't just talk about God, he was the space where God's love manifested in human form. Christ, more than a historical figure, is an archetypal consciousness that embodies love in its purest form. When we say that Jesus is the Christ, we are saying that he fully accessed this creative frequency and embodied it. He became the Word, the Logos, the original sound that gave rise to light. In John 1:1 it is written, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God." This passage is not just theological poetry, it is a metaphysical description of creation. The Word is sound, the sound is vibration, the vibration as creative frequency. Creation begins with the primordial sound, and this sound is love. When Jesus spoke, his voice carried this frequency. He didn't just say, "Be healed." He caused the vibrational structure of the body to reorganize, because his intention was pure, aligned with the source. The word has power because it is materialized sound, and every word uttered carries with it a vibrational charge. That's why Jesus warned about the use of the word. What defiles a man is not what goes in, but what comes out of his mouth. For he understood that each word is a seed sown in the field of creation, and this seed, upon encountering the soil of reality, germinates. Love, when spoken with truth, becomes a healing frequency. And it was this frequency that Jesus spread. He spoke of love, but not as doctrine. He spoke because he knew that love is the very essence of the universe. Loving, for him, was more than a commandment. It was a way of being a creator. In the heart of Christ is the reminder that there is no separation between creator and creature, and that love is the invisible link between everything that exists. Every cell, every atom, every star, and every being is held together by this force. Scientists today are beginning to understand that the universe is not governed solely by physical laws, but by fields of information and coherence. Coherence is the harmony among systems, and this harmony is love in action. When a human being is coherent in what they think, feel, and do, They align with this cosmic matrix and begin to create with more power, clarity, and lightness. Jesus lived in absolute coherence. That's why his presence healed, his breath brought peace, his silence revealed truths. Love is not just a feeling, it's spiritual technology. It's a measurable, recognizable, transformative frequency. When we feel true love, not desire, possession, or attachment, but unconditional love, our energy field expands, the heart rate stabilizes, brain synapses enter a state of cohesion, the body achieves balance, the mind becomes quiet, and the soul feels at home. It's in this state that creation becomes fluid. Because where there is love, there is room for the manifestation of the new. Fear contracts, love expands, and only in expansion does creation continue. Love is the universal language that unites all spiritual traditions. The Vedas speak of love as Ananda, the bliss that emanates from the self. The Sufis dance in ecstasy to dissolve the self and merge with the beloved. The shamans see love as the force that heals, that connects the visible and invisible worlds. In all these traditions, love is not an emotion. It is presence. It is unity. It is a remembrance of the source. Jesus synthesized all of this in simple gestures, in real encounters, in words that cross millennia because they carry the original vibration of creation. He said, "Love one another as I have loved you." And this "as" is not a comparison. It is an instruction. Love with presence, with truth, with compassion, with total surrender. When speaking of love, Jesus reconnected us to the sacred feminine. This creative principle that welcomes, nourishes, envelops, heals. The feminine is not exclusive to women. It is a universal polarity present in all beings. Creation to be complete requires the union between the masculine and the feminine, between action and reception, between strength and gentleness. The heart of Christ pulsates in the balance of these forces. And when these polarities integrate within us, we stop creating out of necessity or fear and start creating out of love, joy, expansion. This is the state that Jesus referred to as the kingdom. Each soul is an extension of the original creation, and this creation happens through the vibration we choose to maintain. When we choose love, we become pure channels. When we choose fear, we create distortions. The good news from Jesus is that we can always change the frequency. We can always return to love. We can always recreate. And this is the deepest miracle, not the one of turning water into wine, but the one of transforming pain into compassion, anger into forgiveness, separation into unity. This is the miracle of love, and this miracle is available now, here, within each awakened heart. In the hidden Gospels, this message appears even more clearly. In texts such as the Gospel of Philip, we find statements like, "He who loves is united with the other. There is no separation where there is love." And furthermore, "The world was born out of love. It will be saved by love." There is no doctrine, no fear, no punishment. Only the certainty that love is the golden thread that weaves all worlds together. And Jesus, as Christ, came to remind us of this with every step, every tear, every silence. He did not die for love. He lived in love. And it is this life that we need to embody. The heart of Christ pulses now, not as a historical memory, but as a living frequency. He is not in the past. He is in the present of those who truly love. Creation, nourished by this love, continues to expand. And we, as sparks of this love, have the responsibility and the privilege to continue creating, with words that heal, with gestures that unite, with thoughts that elevate, with choices that liberate. When love is the foundation, the world transforms, and that's why Christ lives. Because love does not die, it multiplies, it shares, it manifests. And in doing so, creation flourishes, again and again and again. The history of humanity is not only the chronicle of what was remembered, but also the tomb of what was intentionally forgotten. Among the layers of wars, empires, councils, and dogmas, one of the most crucial truths for the awakening of the human spirit is buried. The gospel of creation, not just a lost text, but a living knowledge, a code of wisdom that was surgically ripped from us. What started as a liberating teaching, conveyed directly, symbolically, and vividly, was gradually distorted, edited, censored, erased. What was light became shadow. What was unity turned into separation. What was memory transformed into myth. And so, we forgot. Not by accident, but by spiritual engineering. The first centuries after Jesus' passage on earth were marked by an intense dispute of narratives. While the disciples sought to keep alive the memory of a master who taught about the inner kingdom, unconditional love, and creation as an expression of being, power structures emerged that saw Christianity as an effective tool for control. The Roman Empire, adept at absorbing and manipulating, saw in the Christian faith a political opportunity. The Council of Nicaea in the year 325 was not a spiritual gathering, but a strategic move to consolidate an official version of the story. Gospels were chosen, others were rejected. Those that spoke of an inner creation, of an immanent God, of a Christ that inhabits each being, were labeled as heresy and destroyed. The memory of creation was amputated from tradition. The persecution of the Gnostic Christians was brutal. Men and women who upheld the original message of Jesus, the one that taught that humans carry the divine spark and are capable of co-creating with consciousness, were hunted, silenced, executed. Their libraries were burned, their texts banned, their mystery schools dismantled. The Library of Alexandria, one of the most powerful centers of spiritual and scientific knowledge, was destroyed. With it, an ocean of knowledge about the origins of life, the soul, and the universe disappeared. Each burned scroll was a bonfire lit against the memory of creation, each silenced master, a closed portal. Religion, which should have been a path of reconnection, became a wall of separation. The centuries that followed were ones of domination, fear, and ignorance. Spiritual illiteracy became the norm. Faith was conditioned to obedience. Truth was reduced to dogma. Inner search was punished as blasphemy. And the living Christ, the one who dwells in every being and manifests creation with love, was replaced by a distant figure, sacrificed, idolized, but not understood. The cross, a symbol of passage and rebirth, was transformed into an icon of suffering and guilt. Creation, which should have been celebrated as a divine extension, was associated with sin, error, and condemnation, and thus, we were distanced from our origin. Mary Magdalene, one of Jesus' closest disciples, was perhaps the clearest symbol of this attempt at erasure. She was not just a follower, she was a teacher, an initiate, a guardian of Christ's deepest teachings. In the Gospel of Mary, she appears as the one who understood the true meaning of creation, who saw beyond form, who heard the silent words of the Master and translated them into living wisdom. But tradition reduced her to the status of a repentant prostitute, one of the most perverse manipulations of human spiritual history. The figure of the sacred feminine, the necessary polarity for creation, was erased. And with it, half of the map of totality disappeared from the eyes of humanity. The forgery of the apostles, the Pauline letters, the doctrines of submission, everything was carefully stitched together to keep creation as something external, separate, inaccessible. By transforming Jesus into an idol and denying his internal presence, the religious system created dependency. By removing the Gospels that taught about creation as a continuous act of consciousness, it generated fear. By destroying the texts that spoke of the internal light, it perpetuated darkness. Control is not only exerted through force, but through narrative. And when you control the origin, you control the destiny. By redefining the story of creation, the place of humans in the cosmos was redefined, from creator to creature, from active participant to passive subject, from divine to sinner. However, the truth does not die. It can be forgotten, but not destroyed. Throughout the centuries, fragments of this wisdom have continued to circulate in mystical traditions, in secret texts, in legends, in occult practices. Hermeticism, Sufism, Gnosticism, Kabbalah, Taoism, all have preserved, in their own way, the memory of the original creation. Jesus never belonged to a single religion. He was a universal initiator. His teaching goes beyond scriptures. He spoke to hearts, to cells, to souls. And that is why, even after so much manipulation, his call continues to resonate. Because what is true vibrates in the deepest structure of life, and no one can erase what has been written in the code of existence. Today we live in a time of restoration. Humanity, after centuries of spiritual darkness, begins to remember. The Nag Hammadi texts, rediscovered and translated, are once again available. Ancient traditions are being revisited with fresh eyes. Science begins to touch the mysteries of the unseen. Spirituality, freed from institutional shackles, flourishes in millions of hearts. The light of creation shines again, not as doctrine, but as experience, not as blind faith, but as embodied wisdom, not as future salvation, but as living presence. The gospel of creation is being reborn, and with it, the human being in its original essence is reborn. The memory of creation does not require us to believe in new dogmas. It invites us to be silent, to breathe, to feel, to recognize that the universe is alive within us, that every thought, every emotion, every gesture is a creative act, that separation was an illusion, that the Creator was never far away, that Christ did not come to establish a church, but to awaken a state of being, that creation continues, and that we are called to participate in it with awareness, with love, with freedom. This is the good news that was left out of the books, but it is beginning to be written again, not with ink, but with light. What was lost is returning. What was buried is emerging. What was silenced is starting to sing again in awakened hearts. Creation does not depend on religious approval, institutional tradition, or external authority. It is the natural expression of consciousness. And every time a human being awakens to this, the gospel of creation is rewritten in the Earth's vibrational field. The story has not ended. It is being recreated. And now each of us is called to remember, to restore, to co-create. Because the true gospel was never a book, it was always an experience. And this experience is, more than ever, within our reach. We have reached a point in history where the veil between the visible and the invisible becomes increasingly thin. What was once considered mystical, hidden, spiritual, or even forbidden, now returns with renewed strength, crossing the borders of time to reconnect with those who are ready. Creation, which for millennia was narrated by blind eyes and echoed by soulless voices, begins to be remembered not as a legend, but as a lived reality. The new creation is not a catastrophic event on the horizon of the future, but a silent and grand transformation happening now, within millions of hearts waking from a long slumber. Humanity, after wandering through deserts of fear, guilt, and ignorance, approaches the threshold of a new state of being, not as a return to the past, but as the birth of something never seen before, the conscious union between the divine and the human. This awakening is not sudden, but profound. It doesn't occur by imposition, but by maturity. The accumulated pain, the repetitive cycles of suffering, the systems that promise salvation while imprisoning, all of this has led the collective soul to such a great existential fatigue that the desire for the real, for the essential, for the true, has become unavoidable. And it is at this very point that the memory of creation emerges with transformative power. Truth is not just comforting, it is liberating. And when we understand that we are active participants in creation, that it is not something done in the past, but something that manifests with each of our breaths, there is no more room for passivity. We begin to live as co-authors of reality. And this is the new gospel that will not be written on paper, but in the vibrational field of the earth. We are living today what ancient traditions called the end of times, not in the sense of literal destruction of the world, but in the end of the psychological time of separation. The fragmentation of consciousness is giving way to unity. The illusion of matter as the only reality is being overcome by the perception that everything is energy, consciousness, vibration. Science, slowly, is confirming what the masters always knew. Time is relative, matter is malleable. External reality responds to internal frequency, and in this new paradigm, the human being is no longer a victim of events, but the invisible cause of visible forms. This changes everything. This shifts the axis of creation from the throne of a distant God to the altar of the awakened heart. The new generations already arrive with this memory activated. Children with profound gazes, restless youths with the system, adults seeking purpose. This is not about a behavioral change, but a vibrational transition. The entire planet is raising its frequency. The Earth's electromagnetic field is adjusting to subtler patterns, requiring humanity to keep up with this movement consciously. And this elevation does not happen without challenge. Old structures crumble, beliefs collapse, bonds based on fear break. But all of this is necessary, because you cannot build the new on the ruins of illusion. The new creation demands clean space, a free heart, a quiet mind. The union between science and spirituality, once unimaginable, is now inevitable. Quantum physics teaches us that the observer influences the observed, that reality is a field of possibilities shaped by intention and attention. This is not esoteric. This is conscious creation. When Jesus said, "If you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move,' and it will move," he was not speaking in poetic metaphors, he was describing a universal law of manifestation. Faith is not blind belief, but vibrational coherence between intention, feeling, and action. When a human being achieves this state, they cease to be merely a creature and become a creator. The new Gospels no longer come from hidden scrolls or sealed caves. They emerge from within. Every awakened human being becomes a living verse of this new revelation. Creation, once contained in texts, now pulses in attitudes, thoughts, relationships. The Word became flesh, and the flesh becomes Word again, because the Word has power, and the living Word, the one aligned with love and truth, has the power to reorder reality. Christ now is not just remembered, he is incarnated, not anymore in a single figure, but in a collectivity that recognizes itself as the conscious body of the divine in expression. In this new era, forgiveness becomes a gateway, not as a moral gesture, but as a vibrational technology. By forgiving, we release trapped charges in the energy field. We untie ancestral knots. We cleanse collective memories. We make room for the new. Forgiveness is a way to recreate the past, to rewrite pain in the form of compassion. And this rewriting is not merely symbolic. It transforms the field around, affects cells, changes DNA, alters timelines. This is creation in action. And when a critical mass of human beings start living this way, the entire planetary reality changes. The ascent, so often misunderstood, is precisely this conscious return to the beginning. Not a mystical rapture, but the elevation of consciousness to its natural state of connection. It's living with an open heart, a present mind, the body as a temple, the spirit as a guide. It's living not apart from creation, but as an extension of it. There is no hierarchy between the creator and the creature. There is flow, there is correspondence, there is dance. And every human being, upon remembering this, accesses their rightful place as a co-creator of the universe. The new creation will not come from outside. It is being born now, from within to without, from every conscious gesture, from every choice made with presence and love. In this new era, Jesus is seen as he always was, not an idol to be worshipped, but a mirror to be recognized. He did not come for us to worship him. He came for us to remember him. He was not the exception. He was the example. And this example is alive, not only in the texts, but in the cells of every human being who vibrates in truth. The new creation does not need temples. It needs presence. Every conscious being becomes a sanctuary, every aligned heart becomes an altar, every healing word becomes sacred scripture, and so the word becomes flesh again, this time in an awakened humanity. The earth, so vilified, so ignored, so exploited, is the womb of this new creation. It is the sacred body where light becomes form, where consciousness manifests in diversity, where love is experienced in colors, sounds, textures, and encounters. It will not be destroyed, it will be regenerated. Because the earth is not separate from creation, it is part of it, and every being that awakens to its connection with the planet contributes to this rebirth. Taking care of the earth is taking care of creation. Taking care of oneself is taking care of the whole. There is no more separation. The new creation is unity in action. The lost gospel of creation is no longer lost. It is being remembered, and it will not belong to any religion, any leader, any organization, because it cannot be contained. It lives in everything. It pulses in every atom. It sings in every silence. It manifests in every act of courage, love, truth. And you, who have read up to here, are part of this remembrance. You are not an observer. You are a co-creator. And the sacred history of creation continues now, through you. Mind unfettered, now that the truth has been touched. Tell me in the comments, what is the deepest memory that this revelation has awakened in you? Do you feel that on some level, you already knew this creation that is now beginning to emerge? Share your vision. When we manifest together, the field expands, and the light gains a collective voice. And if you felt something within you align, remember, reignite, then don't stop here. The next step of the journey awaits you. Click now on the video, The Book of 33 Steps, the hidden map Jesus left for enlightenment, and discover the secret map that Jesus himself left, with the 33 steps to soul enlightenment. Each step is a key, each key a new creation. We are just starting, creator of the new earth. Mind unfettered. The revelation continues.